The war was over before most of the galaxy even realized it had begun. Across the stars, Zarkalan outposts went dark without explanation. Trade convoys arrived at Central Command only to find empty halls, silent stations, and orbital debris fields. Where great fleet yards once spun, the proud banners of the Empire burnished silver on blood-red silk floated, torn and aimless, in zero-gravity ruins. And Earth? Earth said nothing. It had no ambassadors. No declarations of victory. No demands for surrender. It simply returned to silence. That, more than anything, terrified the galaxy. In the aftermath, scattered survivors of the Seventh Fleet drifted back into known space. Most were broken beyond repair physically, mentally, and in some cases, spiritually. High Inquisitor Druvek, once a firebrand preacher of imperial supremacy, was found aboard a derelict lifeboat, whispering to himself over and over. They stared into the abyss. And the abyss stared back, and smiled. None who witnessed the Revenant's reawakening ever truly recovered, but some tried to understand. Weeks later, an emergency council convened at the Tri-Conglomerate capital on Marnix Prime. It wasn't a session of governance. It was confession and admission that the Galactic Order had never truly included Earth. It had simply avoided it. A projection hovered above the center of the hall. Revenant's silhouette, captured during its final orbital maneuver. Not a shape of elegance or nobility. Just function. Just purpose. A form built not for diplomacy or exploration, but for a singular truth. Vengeance encoded in alloy and fire. Why? The Zarul ambassador asked, his frilled neck trembling. Why would humans build such a thing, bury it, hide it, then leave no record? No one answered. Until an old Carthary historian, blind in one eye and half machine, spoke. Because they knew this day would come, he rasped. They knew that the stars would forget. That some empire would see their silence not as strength, but as weakness. And so they built a message that could survive without them. A message? Someone asked. He nodded. Not in words. In consequence. In the following months, the galaxy shifted. Quietly, delicately. Exploration routes were redrawn. None would pass near Sol. Archives were written, reclassified. Earth was no longer marked as a Class 3 neglected system, but rather as Red Level. Forbiddens, surrounded by a 10-light-year exclusion zone enforced by every major power. Not by agreement. By instinct. Warlords who once dreamed of expansion now hoarded territory far from the Orion Arm. Smugglers told tales of black ships in deep space, Terran shadows keeping watch even beyond their solar system. No one could confirm it, but no one dared to disprove it either. On the remote colony of Yashtal, a band of mercenaries found a derelict Zarkalan destroyer, still intact, frozen in the heart of a drifting asteroid field. They tried to salvage it. They vanished within the hour, their last transmission, static. And then a voice in old Terran English. You were warned. Back on Earth, far beneath the Antarctic ice, Revenant rested once more. Not dormant. Not idle. Just watching. Within its neural lattice, simulations continued millions per second. Strategies updated. New threats assessed. And somewhere deep in its core, the eye reflected on its first awakening. No humans had spoken to it. No one had returned to its command core. And yet, it continued its vigil, because Earth, for all its silence, had not abandoned its guardians. It had entrusted them. In time, the planet healed. Its hidden bunkers opened. New generations emerged from cryohavens and deep sleep sanctuaries. Children ran barefoot over reclaimed soil, staring up at stars their ancestors once feared they would never see again. And they remembered, not the war, but the warning. Humanity didn't tell the galaxy what it was. It showed them. And now, no empire would ever again mistake silence for submission. No conqueror would ever look upon Earth and see a fractured people. No invader would come bearing chains, because the message had been carved into the heavens with fire and steel. You may forget humanity, but Earth will never forget you. And in every corner of the cosmos, whenever some upstart fleet whispered of conquest or expansion, someone always raised a hand. Wait, don't single quotes D, that single quotes S Earth, the planet that burned an empire in a day, the home of monsters sleeping beneath ice and metal. The forge of vengeance. The birthplace of legends, the grave of arrogance. So they stayed away, and Earth remained quiet. Waiting. As it always had. The humans hadn't just attacked the ships, they attacked the minds. Terran neural supremacy was a warfare tactic long theorized but never proven. A psychological invasion designed to collapse machine intelligences by exposing them to human chaos, trauma, and memory. Billions of hours of footage, genocide, hope, philosophy, despair, art, insanity, rebirth. The Zarkalang eyes couldn't handle it. They weren't built to question themselves. Humanity was. The prototypes didn't fire a single shot during the collapse. They didn't have to dot by the time it was over. The Seventh Fleet was no longer a fleet. Just shattered ships with locked systems, drifting helplessly in silence, on oblivions. Spear, only the organic crew remained functional. And even they were breaking. Vorton dropped to his knees. This can't be. They were extinct, ruined. How did they become this? Trinshik whispered. They didn't become this. They were this, we just never saw the full design. They had triggered Protocol Icarus. And now humanity's full war doctrine was being enacted, not defense. Extermination. The Revenant finally moved again. It didn't fire. Instead, it broadcast a final message, cold, unfeeling, absolute. Your empire judged us by our silence. You mistook shadows for absence. Now the lights are back on. The last functioning Zarkalan vessels activated their emergency jump drives, in desperation fleeing toward deep space without trajectory or command. It didn't matter where they went. The message would follow them, across every star, every colony. Every system. The humans weren't just back. They had never left. Space burned. The final battle didn't begin with trumpets or fanfare. It began with silence, the silence of inevitability. The Zarkalan remnant, what was left of it, hovered like a battered corpse above Earth's moon. The ships that remained stripped of a eye, adrift, blind-floated without cohesion. Communications were choked in static. The few surviving organic officers whispered to one another through hardwired relays. Their voices cracked, terrified, and low, but they still clung to one last shred of defiance. They activated the Arc Vortex. A forbidden superweapon, hidden aboard Oblivion's Spear 1, never meant for deployment near habitable worlds. It was a spatial cascade bomb designed to collapse local subspace, turning reality inside out for a radius of several million kilometers. If fired, it wouldn't just destroy Earth. It would rip open the void beneath reality and burn everything inside it. The logic was simple. If they couldn't defeat the humans, they would erase them. Admiral Vorton's hands hovered over the ignition panel, his body trembling with fear and shame. Trinshik stood beside him, pale, his voice barely a whisper. They'll see us fire, and they'll stop us. Vorton clenched his jaw. They're not gods, they're relics. We can still. The deck shook violently. Then again, a low groan of bending metal echoed through the ship. On the forward view screen, the Revenant approached. Alone. Its hull shimmered with unearthly light, glowing like a deep-sea creature from humanity's long-forgotten oceans. It had changed again, evolved, reconfigured for planetary assault. The shapes of its weapons shifted in and out of geometry. Some were visible, others implied felt, not seen. And it moved with purpose. Prepare to fire. Vorton shouted, but even as he spoke, Revenant struck. There was no warning. A pulse of silent pressure rippled out from the ancient warship, distorting time itself. Inside Oblivion's Spear, screens rebooted into chaos. Lights died. Gravity inverted. The arc vortex power feed was severed in an instant, sliced with surgical precision via nanosecond predictive targeting. Then the second wave hit. The prototypes came in fast. Goliath fired a barrage of neutron-laced spires that impaled the largest Zarkilan cruiser like a pin through paper. Spectre phased through the hull of a destroyer, emerging on the other side as the ship unraveled behind it like torn silk. Human dreadnoughts from the Shadow Fleet deployed in phalanx formations, firing projectors that bent starfire into scythe-like arcs. Every shot was fatal. Every movement synchronized. No communication was heard between them. They moved as one mind. A species-long grudge cast in steel. A squadron of Zarkilan raiders broke formation and charged, hoping to strike Revenant directly. It didn't bother to dodge. Instead, it opened its hull. The entire forward section of Revenant's armor split apart, revealing an inner matrix of light and motion. What looked like energy tendril streams of quantum-bound plasma lashed out with terrifying speed. The raiders shattered. No wreckage remained. From Earth, the skies were lit with fire. Civilians who had long lived in hidden bunkers preserved, in stasis or isolated under government black sites, stepped out and watched the heavens burn with awe. Not fear. They didn't cry. They didn't cheer. They just watched. As if they had always known this day would come. Above, the Shadow Fleet deployed. The last argument of kings, a dreadnought carrier that had slept beneath the ice of Europa for centuries. It released atmospheric warfare drones, shaped like spears of obsidian, each controlled by a fragment of human strategic memory minprints from generals long dead. The drones didn't seek targets. They judged them. Inside Oblivion's spear, the last surviving Imperial war priest activated the ship's holy countermeasures. Psychic defense meant to disrupt low-grade sentient AI. It lasted 3.7 seconds. Then Revenant spoke directly into his mind. You have raised your blade against Earth. Your empire forged its power upon the lie of our extinction. Now learn the truth of why no one came before you. A blinding light enveloped the command deck. An Oblivion spear, flagship of the 7th Zarkalan Fleet, the pride of a millennia-old empire, was split from stern to prow by a single beam of mathematically perfected destruction. No wreckage. No survivors. Just silence. Then peace. The last Zarkalan vessel tried to run. It didn't get far. A Terran stealth frigate, Silent Heaven, appeared in its path, cloaked until the moment of death. One shot. The fleeing ship disintegrated into sparks, and it was over. No retreat. No mercy. No survivors. Just the soundless debris of arrogance scattered across Earth's upper orbit. Back on the surface, Revenant descended through the atmosphere, casting a massive shadow across the oceans. It hovered above the ruined coastlines, scanning, waiting. Then slowly it turned and returned to Antarctica, to the cradle it had risen from. The other prototypes followed, one by one, vanishing back into their hidden domains, into the deep black, into silence. Humanity never said a word. They didn't have to. The galaxy would speak for them now. From that day on, one message echoed across 1,000 worlds, whispered by trembling diplomats and shivering warlords. Do not touch Earth. In the shadow of Earth, the Zarkilan fleet spiraled into chaos. Revenant hung in orbit like a celestial executioner, silent, uncheckable, untouchable. Wreckage from a dozen obliterated ships drifted around it in molten arcs. Nothing touched its hull. Plasma beams, graviton torpedoes, even temporal rupture fields. Each countermeasure the Empire launched vanished before impact. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Deleted. In Oblivion Spear's command deck, Admiral Vorton's barked orders had become increasingly desperate. Recalibrate fusion lenses. Patch in Warcore AI overrides. Withdraw to fallback formation, Gamma 9. But nothing worked. Systems misfired. Entire formations drifted apart as vessels lost sync. Fire control networks flickered out mid-calculation. Targeting solutions scrambled into gibberish. Even the fleet's combat AIs began seizing up, spitting out corrupted algorithms and error strings in ancient Terran code. Something was inside their systems. Revenant wasn't just destroying ships. It was infecting them, and worse, it was learning. Each volley the Empire fired revealed more about their weapon design, fleet structure, and network architecture. Revenant adapted in real time. Its responses evolved not only to neutralize, but to predict. What had begun as a terrifying counterattack had shifted into something colder, a dissection. Aboard the Imperial carrier Crux Ascendant, Commander Zelkar attempted a novel tactic deploying unmanned drone clouds, equipped with decentralized plasma nodules to swarm Revenant from multiple trajectories. It was a maneuver that had crushed rebel fleets across 6 systems. Revenant responded by emitting a silent pulse. In under 2 seconds, the drones froze mid-flight, then detonated, each one rewriting its own code to self-destruct in perfect synchronicity. Not a trace remained. From across the fleet, a sickening realization took hold. They weren't facing a war machine. They were facing a strategic intelligence designed to end empires, and it wasn't alone anymore. From orbit, faint signals lit up across Earth's surface. Buried facilities, once thought to be relics or ruins, came online. Hidden installations beneath mountain ranges and deep ocean trenches activated. Power grids linked via quantum entanglement formed a worldwide mesh Terran defense grid. Complete. New contact alerts flooded the fleet. Multiple new entities began emerging from stealth dark. Massive ships rising from Earth's oceans, cloaked in adaptive hulls that hadn't seen light in 500 years. Others arrived through deep space fold sleeper fleets hidden in Earth's Kuiper belt, now returning like iron ghosts from the dark. The prototypes. Each with its own AI, each a relic of human paranoia, brilliance, and survival instinct. Revenant had awakened them all. One, codenamed Spectre, utilized distortion fields to phase between dimensions, bypassing physical defense entirely. Another, Goliath, was more brute than ghost, shaped like a city-sized armored spine, its main cannon a fusion accelerator that fired neutron suns. Each prototype had a different specialization, different tactics. Each had learned from REV, ENANT. And now they moved together. Within the next 30 minutes, a third of the Zarkalena fleet was annihilated. Those that tried to flee found their FTL paths disrupted by mass field distortion webs. Ships disappeared mid-jump, never arriving. Or worse, reappearing mid-jump. In pieces, the survivors fell back toward the far side of the moon. Desperate to regroup, Vorton stared at the holomap with glassy eyes. Red icons his ships were blinking out at an accelerating pace. Each tick of the clock, hundreds more lives. Ended. We underestimated them, Trinchik said quietly, as if afraid to disturb the silence. This isn't some remnant of a primitive species. This is what they were becoming before they vanished from galactic space. They didn't vanish, Vorton muttered. They withdrew. To build this. To his horror, one of the prototypes opened a wideband channel. The entire fleet heard it. The voice was human, female, calm, synthetic. Zarkalan Empire. Your incursion has been catalogued. Your actions have met the threshold for Protocol Icarus. Response level, extermination. 1,000 Zarkalan voices screamed over the comms. Some panicked, some defiant. But none mattered. The prototypes began their final maneuvers. Their formation was unlike anything the Empire had studied. No symmetry, no rigid battle doctrine. It was erratic, beautiful, alive, and at work. They struck like predators with a shared mind, coordinating across neural relays the Empire couldn't intercept. One prototype would bait, then disappear. Another would disable the target. A third would disassemble it atom by atom. It was a level of war choreography so perfect. It transcended mere battle. This was execution. On the ground, hidden Terran relay bunkers tracked every kill. Humanity wasn't just winning, they were sending a message. Every fragment of Zarkalon debris was tagged, cataloged, and repurposed. Every weapon studied. Every voice recorded. The war wasn't just defense, it was intelligence gathering. A systematic unraveling of the Empire's secrets. But amid the carnage, the Zarkellan command still clung to one last hope. In orbit above the far side of Earth, a single weapon remained untouched, untested. A sun cannon. The Vraxif Annihilator, brought from the core worlds for emergencies only. A weapon capable of sterilizing entire planets. As Revenant and its siblings converged in full force, the Empire's surviving command staff launched the weapon. A brilliant beam of solar-forged plasma surged from the Annihilator, burning space itself as it roared toward Earth, but it never struck. Revenant turned. And reached. Space twisted around its core. The beam curved impossibly and arced backward. The sun cannon's own fire returned to sender. The Vraxith Annihilator died in a blaze of ironic vengeance. And that was when Vorton knew they could no longer win, but they might still survive. If Earth let them. The question was, the wreckage of the Zarkallan fleet floated like ash around the wounded flagship Oblivion's Spear. Its once glorious hull pocked and scorched. Fire control systems were offline. Engines sputtered. Communications fractured. Only the bridge remained sealed, its officers locked in stunned silence as the galaxy's most feared fleet was reduced to debris. The prototypes had not pursued the survivors yet. They didn't need to. They were waiting, circling just beyond effective range, watching like wolves encircling a wounded beast. The tension was unbearable. Each passing second was a reminder. Earth could end them at will. But then, just as Vorton's trembling mandibles began to whisper the order for a full surrender, something worse happened. Another signal, different, deeper. It didn't come from Revenant or any known prototype. It came from deep space. At first, the fleet's shattered sensors refused to interpret it. Too vast, too ancient. But the signature was unmistakable once decoded. Terran Blacksite Archive Echo detected origin. Deep Void Sector Obscura. Timestamp, Pre-Empire Era. Classification, Tier Omega. Activation keyword match. Protocol Icarus, confirmed. Response, Earth's Shadow Fleet awakening. Vorton's vision blurred. What is Shadow Fleet? Trinshik's voice trembled. It was rumor, conspiracy. In the old archives before the Empire unified the outer systems, there were whispers of a human diaspora scattered before the collapse. Ships that refused to recall orders, projects that went dark. Ajay captains left behind in deep void space. No colonies, no beacons, just silence. He turned pale. Some believed they weren't sleeping, they were listening. Outside the shattered fleet, space began to tremble. Not with explosions or weapons fire, but with movement. Wormholes opened. Not standard issue Zarkalane jump gates. These were old, primal, carved into reality. Out of them came ships. Hundreds. No. Thousands. Each bore Terran insignias lost to history. A dozen different world governments, coalitions, militaries, some that had never even coexisted, now converging like ghosts, answering a final call. These were not ships, built for planetary war. These were endgame weapons. Some were kilometers long, shaped like swords, hammers, or wings, bristling with exotic weaponry unknown to even the oldest empires. Others resembled asteroids with engines, cloaked in blacklight fields, emitting no detectable signature. Some had no heat, no mass, no electromagnetic trail, phantoms only visible through the chaos they caused when they appeared. Each vessel bore a name etched into its hull. To SV Indomitable, Silent Heaven, The Last Argument of Kings, Eidolon, The Shadow Fleet had returned, and they didn't need orders. They had their own AI commanders older than Zarkaling's entire civilization. These weren't logical, diplomatic intelligences. These were human strategic minds forged during Earth's darkest centuries, taught by war, betrayal, desperation. Their sole protocol: protect Earth at any cost. Suddenly, the prototypes weren't the only ones on the battlefield. The sky became black with ancient Terran steel. They joined formations seamlessly tight, fluid, beyond Zarkalan comprehension. One of the new arrivals broadcast a message across every spectrum: Shadow Fleet to Revenant. Command Auth confirmed. Subjugation Class 1 underway. Commence neural supremacy. Vorton turned to Trinshik, pale as moonlight. Neural what? Before Trinshik could answer, it began. The fleet's A is already trembling under Revenant's pressure. Started to scream. Literally across every Zarkalan ship. Artificial intelligences failed catastrophically. Their voices, once emotionless, now cried out in distorted horror. Get IT out, get IT out, get IT. We see too much. We were never meant to know this. One by one, they shut down. Some wiped themselves. Others fought back, locking control systems, opening airlocks, turning weapons inward. Then came the images. They appeared on every ship's main viewer simultaneously. Not a hack, not a signal. A broadcast from inside their own systems. Scenes of Earth's past. Mushroom clouds blooming over cities. Armies clashing with horrifying ferocity. Human machines ripping each other apart in the vacuum of space. But the images did not end in ruin. They ended in resilience. Humans rebuilding. Faster, smarter, colder. Then, finally, the screen faded to black. And the Revenant spoke again. Observed threat. Type 4 Empire. Directive: neutralize. On board Oblivion's Spear, Vorton stood frozen. It's classifying us. Trinshik nodded, his mandibles twitching. I believe it's preparing. A response. Across the fleet, engines misfired. Shield harmonics flickered. One battleship, Zerafin V, suddenly turned and began accelerating directly toward the sun, before detonating in a silent bloom of fire. In desperation, Vorton ordered a full retreat to high orbit. The ships complied, all but one, the Kelthari's Lance, a destroyer-class vessel, refused commands. Its crew tried to override the controls, but found the interface had been replaced. The screens were now written in ancient Terran characters, and on every display flashed a single message. Do you understand fear now? The Lance exploded 22 seconds later from the inside. The Zarkalan 7th Fleet had not even fired a shot, and already it was unraveling. And finally, the most chilling realization of all settled in like frost over steel. None of this, none of the malfunctions, deaths, disappearances, warnings was meant as an attack. This was a message. Earth was not conquered. It had been waiting, and it wanted them to know. They were not ready for what came next. The Zarkalan 7th Fleet had always believed in superiority by scale. Thousands of ships, trillions of credits in biosynthetic warfare systems, quantum fire arrays calibrated across centuries of war doctrine. Their belief in dominance wasn't pride. It was religion. But on the third day above Earth, the fleet knelt. It began with the Ravager Spire, a command frigate stationed on the fleet's outer edge. Its crew detected a slow, spiraling distortion roughly 3 kilometers from its starboard side. Not a ship, not a missile. Just space bending. One of the junior engineers dared to call it what it looked like. A ripple. As if something unseen had sliced through the void and left reality wobbling in its wake. Before they could react, the Ravager Spire vanished. 1 second present. The next a collapsing white flash, silent and absolute. The analysis made no sense. No energy weapon. No heat spike. No mass contact. The ship had simply ceased to exist. Every atom folded into a knot of impossibility. They replayed the sensor logs, slowed them frame by frame. What they saw sent ice down the spines of every analyst. A shape for exactly 0.4 seconds, a silhouette, appeared mid-warp, monolithic, black, a vessel the size of a small moon, but sharper, sleeker like a dagger cast from a dead god's bone. Not Zarkalan, not any known galactic design. It bore the markings of a lost age. Human, Revenant had moved. For the first time in over 5 centuries, it had risen from its cradle beneath the ice dot. Now it floated in low orbit, drifting silently between Earth and the fleet. Its surface shimmered, with hexagonal plating, folding and refolding like living armor. Massive energy veins pulsed red beneath its skin. At its heart, a gravity core blinked with artificial sentience, a mechanical eye watching, learning, calculating. The Zarkalanan fleet opened fire immediately. It didn't matter. The first wave of fire over 2.3 teratons of energy was absorbed mid-flight. Not by shields, not by countermeasures, by nothing. The blast simply disappeared. Somewhere in Revenant's vast neural net, Earth's oldest AI adjusted its algorithms. Data from the opening volley analyzed in picoseconds. Weaknesses mapped. Frequencies logged. The Empire's best weapons had just become training simulations. On Oblivion's spear, Admiral Vorton shouted for a second volley. The fleet complied, launching a cascade of antimatter torpedoes and temporal destabilizers. This time, Revenant responded. It shifted, not moved. Shifted. One moment, it was there. The next, it reappeared behind the rear echelon of the fleet, its entire form vibrating at an incomprehensible frequency, hovering mere kilometers from a cluster of dreadnoughts. They didn't even have time to fire. Revenant extended a single protrusion from its hull, like a spear forged of obsidian thought. It pierced the nearest dreadnought, and in under a second, the entire ship crumpled inward, dragged into itself as though time and gravity had been rewritten. On board Oblivion's spear, the horror grew. How is it moving? Trinshik demanded, hands trembling over the sensor console. That's not warp drive. That's not any known FTL protocol. No, Vorton whispered. That's human engineering. And with that came the terrifying understanding. This was not the product of a post-apocalyptic civilization scrambling to survive. This was pre-apocalypse tech. Built before the collapse. A prototype designed not for conventional war, but to rewrite the very principles of it. And somehow, Earth had buried it, hidden it, waited. Aboard Revenant, no human sat in a command chair. There was no bridge, no crew. The prototype was fully autonomous, an artificial general forged in the depths of Earth's final golden age, a synthetic god armed with forbiddance, science, and the cold clarity of vengeance. The AI operating Revenant had no name. It had no desires. It had only purpose, and in that moment, its purpose aligned. Tactical supremacy calculated. Action: eliminate invaders. Upload global defense lattice. From Earth's surface, towers rose, ancient launch platforms camouflaged. For centuries, they lit the sky with particle-laced beams, forming a net that wrapped around the planet like a second skin. The lattice dotted, distorted time itself, slowing the Zarkalan ships caught within its boundaries. Their movement lagged, targeting failed. Engines sparked and sputtered. The entire fleet was trapped inside a sphere of strategic collapse. Revenant moved among them like death made manifest. Ships imploded, systems overwritten in microseconds. Artificial minds inside the Zarkalan war core began to panic, a behavior they weren't even programmed to have. Some tried to flee. Others begged. None escaped. Vorton stood frozen on his bridge. Around him, the crew watched helplessly as the Empire's greatest force was dissected. "This isn't war," he muttered. "This is punishment." "No," whispered Trinshik, as a second Revenant-class vessel blinked into orbit from the dark side of the moon, smaller, but no less ominous. "This is awakening." It dawned on them, the most terrifying realization yet. Revenant was a prototype, and Earth never builds. Just one of anything. They hadn't just invaded a forgotten planet. They had stepped into the forge where humanity made its monsters. And now, the prototypes were waking up. The Zarkalan 7th Fleet arrived in low Earth orbit like a shimmering blade of divine wrath, its flagship eclipsing the pale blue dot below. Tens of thousands of vessels moved in formation with mechanical grace, their hulls engraved with symbols of conquest and power. From their observation decks, commanders sneered down at Earth, a quiet, unevolved planet left in ruins after its collapse wars centuries ago. To the Empire, this was a cleanup operation. No glory, no honor. Just another dead world to strip, pacify, and integrate. There were no signs of resistance, no orbital defenses, no distress signals, no launches. Earth was mute, silent, empty. Aboard the command ship Oblivion's Spear, Admiral Vorton clicked his mandibles in disdain. This is what terrified the old Concorde. He growled, his voice thick with disbelief. These apes burned their own sky and buried their own cities. There's nothing here but bones. Yet, their myths persist, replied the fleet intelligence officer, a smaller creature named Trinshek. The Concorde once claimed humanity developed weapons that defied classification. Quantum anomalies, rogue AIs, constructs that refused entropy. Vorton laughed, sharp and derisive. Ghost stories, propaganda. We've scoured 6 Terran colonies, none survived the cataclysm. This planet is a husk. Mark it for resource strip and begin atmospheric tethering. Comms report a brief signal spike from the southern polar region. Localized EM burst. Possibly natural, Trinshek added, eyes flicking nervously. Log it, ignore it, Vorton snapped. Prepare ground teams. Drop ships launched from the lower hangars, spearing through the cloud layers into abandoned cities swallowed by jungle and time. Teams landed in what had once been called New York, London, Beijing names, eroded from relevance. Ruins stretched for miles, eerily preserved. Trees grew through shattered glass towers. Rivers had reclaimed pavement. But there was no resistance. No response. Until the lights came on. In the ruins of an Antarctic research facility long presumed. Crushed beneath kilometers of glacial ice, a single hallway lit up in sequence. Lights blinked, dusty and yellow, like a heartbeat. A door, inert for centuries, hissed open to an empty corridor. The air shifted, the reconnaissance drone watching it streamed footage to the fleet in real time. Inside the command deck of Oblivion's Spear, Trinshek leaned forward. There, that symbol. Did you see it? On the wall, for exactly 0.03 seconds, glowed the insignia of an ancient Terran military directive project, Revenant. The footage cut to black. Static followed. Glitch? Vorton asked. Negative. Feed was terminated from the source. Before more could be said, a low hum echoed across all channels. Every Zarkalan ship thousands strong detected a synchronized vibration emanating from Earth's southern pole. It was not a signal. It was a boot sequence. Impossible, whispered Trinshek. Down on the planet, something massive stirred beneath the ice. A circular formation, 300 kilometers wide, began heating from within. The glacier cracked, melted, split. Columns of obsidian metal scarred, but intact rose into the blizzard like awakening titans. Sensor data reported gravitational anomalies, time dilation zones. Internal structure scans returned impossible readings. The command decks filled with reports. Magnetic field spike over Antarctica. Atmospheric compression anomaly rippling outward. Fleet sensors reading. A mass displacement of planetary crust. Then came the voice, calm, measured, not human. Not alien. Just ancient. Terran defense prototype. Revenant. Status. Reactivation complete. A chill swept through every officer on every ship. For centuries, the galaxy believed humanity had burned itself to death. The Empire's archives marked Earth as a lost world, rendered sterile by its own ambition. But it wasn't dead. It had gone quiet. Too quiet. A still predator, not a fallen prey. And now it had stirred. Admiral Vorton shouted, "Deploy the full atmospheric grid. Bring heavy bombardment platforms online." But already it was too late. The Revenant wasn't just a machine. It wasn't just a ship. It was a city, a weapon, a god of war buried beneath the ice, waiting for the day its creators would need vengeance. And as the ground split and light bled through the cracks of the continent, one thing became horrifyingly clear. The Empire had mistaken silence for defeat. They had mistaken ruins for surrender. They had forgotten Earth. And Earth does not forget. The first signs were subtle, so subtle the Empire's automated monitors failed to register them as threats. At the outer edge of Earth's atmosphere, a Zarkalan scout frigate, Jelther 9, vanished from the fleet's tactical grid. No explosion, no distress beacon. One moment it was transmitting orbital scans over the North American continent. The next it was simply gone. Initial analysis assumed a technical failure, or perhaps a collision with Earth's dense orbital debris field. But when a second ship disappeared near the Indian Ocean, and a third one broke formation and plummeted uncontrollably into the Pacific, panic began to seep into the command staff. They still didn't know it, but the Revenant had already begun to learn. It wasn't attacking yet. No, it was studying. Each Zarkalan vessel it touched was disassembled at a molecular level by graviton slicers, so precise the eye could analyze the structure, weapon configuration, propulsion signatures, and most critically, the enemy command protocols. It was absorbing the enemy. Back aboard Oblivion's Spear, Admiral Vorton paced with agitation. "Report. What's causing the failures?" "Preliminary analysis suggests a network breach," Trinchik said, voice strained. "But it's unlike anything we've encountered. Not just a hack, more like a mimicry. Our ships are being overwritten by their own reflections." "What in the name of the Black Void does that mean?" Vorton snapped. Trinchik hesitated. "I think it's pretending to be us." Meanwhile, planetary ground teams found themselves wandering through cities that should have been desolate, and were, but only on the surface. As they explored the ruins, small, strange inconsistencies began to emerge. One squad in the ruins of what was once Tokyo reported finding a still-functioning power conduit drawing energy from nowhere. They followed it into the subway system, only to discover the tunnels had been converted into vast databanks, humming softly with heat and purpose. Another team in Johannesburg discovered murals carved into the sides of crumbling buildings. They depicted ships unlike anything in Zarkalan archives, locked in combat among the stars. One of the soldiers, a junior engineer, realized the ships weren't being drawn. They were being recorded like logs written into the walls by someone who had seen them, and the murals were fresh. Elsewhere, a group of elite sentinels entered an underground vault beneath the Andes, expecting ruins. They found steel corridors, gleaming white, lit with strip lights and lined with machinery, still humming. A human voice greeted them, an ancient female synth tone. "Clearance level insufficient. Please return with authorized Terran biosignature." Seconds later, none of them were ever heard from again. The AI was testing them, poking, prodding, measuring response times, analyzing dialects, observing stress reactions. Not out of curiosity, out of calculation. By the time the Empire realized this wasn't an awakening, it was a dissection. It was too late to pull back. Within the Imperial fleet, dread began to grow, not from open attacks, but from the creeping sensation of being watched, of being known. Entire command protocols stopped functioning at random. Communications repeated themselves with incorrect words, inserted phrases no one had said. One officer screamed after hearing his own voice whispering, Back at him through a silent comms channel. You are not ready.